Welcome back to the Daily Drama on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We're taking a closer look at a crisis in classrooms across the country, the shortage of Black educators, and in particular, Black male teachers. Representation matters, and research shows that when Black male students have Black teachers, outcomes improve. So why are there so few? We'll talk with leaders from the Center for Black Educator Development about what's being done to change that, including their upcoming 2025 Black Men in Education Conference. My guests are Dr. Orpheus Williams, Chief Program Officer for the Center for Black Educator Development, and Leon Smith, a social studies teacher. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Sure thing. Let me start with just a few fast facts. Black educators represent only 7% of U.S. public school teachers. Black men account for slightly above 1.3%. Big picture, how serious is the shortage of Black educators, specifically Black men in America's classrooms, even outside the numbers that I just mentioned, Dr. Williams?
Yeah, the numbers kind of speak for themselves when Black students represent roughly 15% of the student population in public schools nationwide, obviously in many ways concentrated in certain areas in urban and suburban blocks of the country where the disparity is even greater. So we're dealing now with generations of students, mothers, grandmothers, and their children and so on that haven't had any exposure to an educator that has shared their cultural or heritage and experience. We don't know countless number of students that aren't even counted in the statistics anymore because they didn't make it past 6th grade or 8th grade because the crisis was that amplified even at the early grades where it is critical for students, particularly students of color and Black students, to embrace school as a place where they can continue to thrive and grow and feel like every aspect of their being is reflected and celebrated. When that is absent, to go beyond the numbers, the psyche and the assumption of what school as an entity is for the Black community, it becomes something of a disservice. It's not seen as a part of the community. It's not seen as an extension of the home. It's seen as a beginning of an entrance into a system that is unwelcoming in many, many other different aspects of public service and public interaction. When the school, and we think about the concept of a school to prison pipeline, when the school is even conceptualized in that way, it's seen as not a place for reinvigorating interest and curiosity in the living space and in the development of the mind, but diminishing a person's ability to actually realize their own potential. Now, unlocking that involves first and foremost having students have the opportunity to interact with folks that have some degree of understanding and resonance about their cultural, their physical, their community, and their spiritual and emotional experience in this country, and helping a child begin to develop the skills in conjunction with their homes training to navigate that system and still find their own personal freedom, their own personal liberation. So hence our organization wouldn't exist if we didn't need it. And our number one tagline and movement is about rebuilding the national Black teacher pipeline because it's been so drastically diminished over the past 50, 60 years.
So why do you suspect that there is such a shortage?
Yep. Our keynote speaker this year at our Black Male Educators Convening is Dr. Leslie Fenwick. And she wrote a book that illuminated and also brought back to the forefront a crisis that occurred as an aftermath of Brown versus Board of Ed. What people don't seem to realize with the full story of that is once those educators were separated from the students, they didn't follow the students to desegregate the staff of the schools that Black students were asked to go to. They were left disenfranchised. All of those Black educators that were teaching at that point were not allowed or were not invited into those schools. Then enter a periodic sort of disarming of teachers and educators as seen as critical to overall community experience. It becomes a disincentive to explore education and teaching as a job because in the beginning, you couldn't find a job, even if you had a degree or an advanced degree in education, because you were immediately removed under the guise of desegregation. That over generations makes it very difficult to re-incentivize our community members to understand just how critical teaching is, added with the current public opinion of what teaching is versus other professions, on top of the differences in pay that an entry level that a teacher gets versus others. All of these factors contribute specifically to those who have been I guess, impacted and marginalized the most by our educational system, making it hard for us to re-enter the system or recruit elementary, middle, and high school students to be interested and turned on and excited about the idea of becoming an educator. And that's, again, where we get into the picture. That's why we exist.
Well, I do want to talk about some of the kind of the basics of what you were saying, because first of all, you taught in the District of Columbia.
Yes.
And compared to other parts of the country, big or small, I mean, the reality is I know a lot of young Black men who are coming out of college. They just may say, hey, look, teaching doesn't pay a lot. You don't pay me enough to deal with the modern student. I mean, that's brass tacks.
Mm-hmm. Understanding, and I would love, if possible, to hear from the brother Leon as well, understanding that the economic reward is also tied to some degree of having to relinquish aspects of your daily experience and your ability to be fully present in whatever job that you occupy. It also downplays and doesn't fully give light to those who have a passion for young people and their community and are unable to find a pathway to serve outside of some type of civic engagement, police or fire department, which is fantastic and necessary, but not seeing teaching on that same caliber as something that to be regaled and celebrated within the community.
Well, what say you, Leon, about this? Unmute your mic, please. Keep it unmuted.
So for me, I mean, I think that certainly there is that economic component that you mentioned, but I think there's also an activism component too, where you can give back to your community. And so, yes, you're not going to necessarily, be very wealthy, but you do have an opportunity to make change. And I think that especially when you think about the things that are happening in our world, some of the realities that exist, to actually know that you're going into a job where you can actually have a direct impact on the future and molding future leaders and preparing students with critical analysis skills. That to me is very rewarding, knowing that you are not someone that is just going to complain about what's happening, but you're actually making a difference in changing what's going on in the world. Also, teachers can be leaders outside of the classroom. Some of the work that I do is advocacy work. So not only am I able to prepare my students to be future leaders, but I've had the opportunity to talk to legislators and policymakers about changes that can build a pathway for future educators and in some ways maybe make it better for ourselves. So I don't think that people should feel helpless. I feel like you feel energized about the change that you can make.
So let me ask you this, Leon. How long have you been teaching? What do you teach? Where do you teach?
So this is my 25th year in teaching. I teach in Delaware County, Pennsylvania at Haverford High School, and I teach social studies. I teach American studies, and I teach AP US history. And very proud to say that I developed just a regular African American studies course. And so for years, students had come to me saying, that they wanted to learn more about their history and culture. And, that's why representation matters, that because of my presence, I was able to create a course where students were able to feel seen and learn about themselves and hopefully realize that their history matters.
That sounds all fine, well, and good in Pennsylvania, where you are. But in this day and age, in our current political climate, that may not fly in Missouri. That may, unless it's in St. Louis or maybe Kansas City, that may not fly in Oklahoma. It may not fly in Texas. What do you think, Dr. Williams, is the big challenge when it comes to Black men educators when they are up against these political headwinds?
I think first and foremost, what came to mind is those Black male educators and Black educators in general in all of these places nationwide that think they're alone, that think they have to start this battle and face this challenge by themselves, that are not connected to a network which can equip them, first and foremost, with the creativity and the resilience to navigate whatever system that they're in. This isn't the first time we've dealt with what's called now, cultural politics, whatever you want to call it, that was trying to diminish the content and hard facts of our history as a country and as a community, but also the impact that we can have to affect change as a community. This isn't the first time that that's been challenged, and it probably won't be the last. And it's up to us to make sure that those educators out there do not feel alone. When I think about Black liberation, Black freedom, and Black enlightenment, it exists in Texas. It exists in those far two-school places, 600 district places that we think, or may not even think about, that have forgotten about as a community. It is part of my job to lift up Brother Leon as, again, congratulations, as an agent of change in his community, but also to show an example of what is possible and to encourage a conversation about what are your realities that we can help collectively you navigate, because you want to stay in the place where you were born and raised, and you want to stay in your community. So I think the myth that these folks are standalone warriors needs to be diminished behind closed doors for us as a community, and we need to embrace each other in all of the different circumstances that we're dealing with, because we can strategize and figure out how to get the truth out regardless of the circumstance. Also, each one of us has to understand our role. If you are a district leader, you have a role in opening and not gatekeeping, but gate permitting. If you are a teacher, you have a role to know and understand the conditions and the impact that all this is having on your students individually. Some of us fight this fight in different ways, but none of us are doing it alone. And platforms like this allow us to remind ourselves, you can reach out to us after this show. Our emails will be available, but we need to stay in community to figure out how to navigate the unique geographic differences that we're all going to face under the same umbrella of just the old story of morphing oppression and morphing dehumanizing that we've been dealing with as a community, sadly, since we were entered into this community.
To your point, before I take a break, I did want to have you share, Dr. Williams, some of the, just the information, the conference that is coming up. I understand it's already sold out, but which is, I think, is a good thing. It is illustrative of the need and the hunger for the impact that Black male teachers and, by extension, educators. I shared before we came on with you, but I come from a family of teachers. Mm-hmm. My mother, I'm telling Mr. Smith is, my mother was an elementary school teacher and principal, retired from the DC public school system. My father was a teacher in DC before he eventually became president of the Washington Teachers Union. I have a first cousin who is a high school principal, another first cousin who is an award-winning teacher of music. My daughter teaches in an elementary school, so I understand from whence you cometh. I understand in the rewards and the challenges. But Dr. Williams, for those who are interested in finding more about the organization, where do they go? Yep. What kind of resources do you have?
Yep. Go to our website, cbed.com, literally .org, the Center for Black Educator Development.org.
Slow down. Let me, because some of us are writing by hand.
Not a problem. Not a problem. It's cbed.org. That's the Center for Black Educator Development.org. And there you'll find information about all of our programming. We have a high school program called Teaching Academy, which prepares 9th through 12th graders, not only to think about and what it means to possibly teach in the future, to have an apprenticeship during their 11th and 12th grade year, where they're paired with a mentor teacher at a lower grade, and they're actually co-teaching and teaching small groups. We have a fellowship program for college graduates and 1st to 5th year teachers that supports them with programming for 9 years. That's from freshman year to their 5th year of teaching. And at the end of their 5th year, after having programming and financial support during all of that period, they'll receive a $20,000 retention bonus for staying in the profession up to year 5. And lastly, we have Freedom Schools Literacy Academy. It is exactly what it sounds like, built in the legacy of what Freedom Schools were back in Mississippi in '64. There are summer school programs for rising first through third graders in Philadelphia right now, and we have a virtual option. It is staffed by high school and college students who are under the guidance of mentored and certified teachers. It's a magnificent, and it's top of mind for me because we just had our annual report about it today, which were the glowing outcomes from that program. And then what I mentioned earlier, the Black Male Educators Convening, which is in November, coming up in less than 20 days, November 20th through the 22nd, we're bringing together 1,400 Black educators. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say that number, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, hold that point because I've got to take a break. Don't forget what you were going to say. We're going to pick up on the other side. We want to remind our listeners that you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insights segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM Channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about Black male educators. My guests are Dr. Orpheus Williams, Chief Program Officer for the Center for Black Educator Development, and Leon Smith, a social studies teacher. Dr. Williams, finish your point.
Yeah, so I was talking about just the details for the Black Male Educators Convening in Philadelphia. It's coming up in about 20 days. It's November 20th to the 22nd. 1,400 Black educators in one place. And when I say educators, I mean aspiring middle school and high school education students and retired superintendents and politicians that are in office right now. Through that 3-day convening, we're going to hear from every aspect of education as it relates to what it means to not only rebuild that national Black teacher pipeline, but continue to fortify that national grid or community of Black educators that know that they can rely and look to each other for ongoing conversations after that space. The speakers include, oh, go ahead.
No, please finish.
The speakers include, I mentioned earlier, Dr. Leslie Fenwick, Lupe Fiasco, Bomani Jones, Dr. Christopher Emden, Dr. Lisa Delpit, Dr. Zaretta Hammond. It is an incredible experience. And one thing I'll say, and this is for audience members of a certain age, the last time I was in a place with over 500 Black educators or Black people, period, the next thing that comes close for me was the Million Man March. And the reason why I say that is because it was one of the few times in every direction, 360 degrees, we were all of one accord, which was the support and reinforcement of a message that was strengthening our community, regardless of politics. And I'm being very intentional right now. I'm speaking to those listeners who are aligned with what we're thinking about when we talk about refortifying the Black community. And that is racially ambiguous, but I'm speaking to those listeners. That was the last time me as an educator had felt that feeling. We have 2 generations of teachers that have been in the classroom close to 10, 20, 30 years. They've never experienced anything even close to that. So it really is a powerful thing where the entire hotel becomes of one sentiment and wavelength around a message that's focused on Black children and Black communities.
Mr. Smith, why did you decide to become a teacher?
I would say there was a collection of things. Both, like you, both my parents were educators. My mom was a teacher and then an administrator. My father was a teacher as well. The stories I heard about all of the work that they did in the school district of Philadelphia to help students was always very empowering to me. At my church, my pastor would always highlight Black history. He went to Morehouse and he would always celebrate students. They were always brought up to the front of the church. And so young people were always celebrated there. When I went to camp, I was often, Sharif Al-Mekki, he always talks about the tap. I was always told by adults in my life that I had a talent with young people. They always appreciated that. And then my high school experience was a little frustrating because, at my church, I was always surrounded by excellent and outstanding, Black men, Black women, people that were doing well. But then when I went to my school, I didn't see those types of adults around me. And I was frustrated by that. My high school only had like one Black teacher that I never had. And then I know that my peers were not having the same experience that I was having in my family and in my church. And I knew the stereotypes that existed in society were being perpetuated by what they weren't seeing. And so I had a student teacher one time that came into my classroom named Mr. Haynes. And I remember that he just was very professional. He was excellent. And it was definitely the teacher that I saw myself being able to become to make sure that these types of situations didn't happen again. And so I think for me, all of those things kind of played together. I always enjoyed social studies. I always enjoyed current events. I was inspired by Black history and Black excellence. And I wanted to make sure that other students in the future saw that and didn't have the same experience.
Mm. Let me ask Dr. Williams this. Did you always have Black male teachers throughout your educational experience?
I had two from K-12 in school.
Really?
I had numerous in my family space, in my caregiver space. I only had two in school, and they were both after 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What impact do you believe that had on you? Well, I'm not even going to say started at the bottom. You're just here because you because you are doing what you do. But if we really drill down on the impact of those two, or the lack of more than two, what impact do you believe it had on you?
Yeah, I was fortunate with those teachers at home who instilled in me the concept of knowledge of self. They also instilled in me, because of their experience, that school was not going to be a place where I was going to experience a reflection or an enhancement of self. So I had to armor myself when I went to school. When I got to the two Black teachers, one in 8th grade and one in high school, who became my basketball coach, completely rearranged my conception of what a teacher was, because they were like uncle teachers to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they meant, they knew and understood this school is more than the walls and the classes. It's about crafting you into somebody that can withstand, but also can develop a fearlessness about being yourself and stepping into spaces with at that time a gentleman's sort of demeanor, but also knowledge of self, history, and community, that you could refute anything that was incorrect about what people were stereotyping you to be. They showed this to me verbally and non-verbally, by the way they presented themselves, by the way I watched them interact with their other Black colleagues, but also colleagues across lines of difference, and the way they interacted with my mother. The way I saw them switch modes when they were in school and when they were talking to my mother, recognizing my mother had been also an agent in this idea of knowledge of self, fascinated me. It was a new concept of manhood for me. Mm-hmm. So along with that, not only the Blackness of my youth, but the manhood of my youth took a huge turn after interacting with those two individuals. It still took, it didn't come to fruition while I was a teacher. I look back now, I think I could have been such a better teacher. It took by the time I became a principal, I had proven skill-wise that I had the strategies and the practical knowledge to do the things that a teacher or a principal in the classical sense was supposed to do. But I wasn't empowering my students. Often when I tell my story, I tell people I was an overseer. I was the one that was ensuring the Black children were compliant for my first 2 years. And I say that without shame, because I want to be able to show you can step out of that once you recognize you're being used like that as an agent. And it took my staff and compounding knowledge that I had to reach back from my own youth and other exposure. I blame Jawanza Kanjufu, I blame Mwali Shuja and all these other folks, because they reconnected me to what I knew what my truth was. I became a very different educator after that, because up until that point, I was performing roles. I was a teacher, I was a principal. But at that point, I say for myself, I actually became a Black educator, realizing that this is way more than doing what's on the job description. So my path was different, right? I don't know what my path would have been. Maybe that enlightenment would have come earlier, but it came when it needed to.
Same question for you, Mr. Smith. How many Black male teachers did you have during your early educational experience, and what impact did they have on you?
So in my K to 12 experience in public school, I didn't have a black teacher as the main teacher. I had one as a student teacher, but I think to even my Sunday school experience, I had black educators that were contributing to the community because they felt it was an important thing to do. And I think for me that was very important because I saw the excellence at my church. I saw these men giving back to us again, showing us an example, showing us how to be men. And then when I was going to my public school, I wasn't having that same experience. And it was just frustrating because I could understand the power of having a black male navigate somebody that has gone through some of the same things I'm going through right now. I can watch them, I can learn from them. So in my K to 12 experience, I didn't have a black male educator as my formal teacher. I had one as a student teacher, but at Sunday school, throughout my life, always had black men contributing there.
I'm reflecting on my own experience because, going to K through 12, starting in the District of Columbia and then finishing in Prince George's County, black male teachers were everywhere. And maybe I'm thinking because it was the norm that I may have, if a child can take it for granted, we don't know. They're just teachers. Mm-hmm. We don't know until we become adults. And then, of course, there were several black male teachers in high school. And then that's all you get when you go to an HBCU. That's it, And so I think if nothing else, the osmosis of that experience is really, really edifying. And now when we talk about this issue and we realize that there are so few, we realize just how much they're needed. I know, Dr. Williams, that we are going to lose you in just a few minutes, but I did want you to at least, share some final thoughts before you leave this part of the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think about that dichotomy of experience that you just described, right? Like having almost all black teachers and maybe sparsely one or two. Representation and being there is one. But remember, I said I was an overseer for a period of my educational career. What is the mindset of that black educator that's standing in front of you and all those other students that's going to ignite every student, and particularly those who have been ignored or marginalized by school experience? We've all heard the term "skin folk ain't always your kinfolk." That's why I said I'm glad that we have this forum because it's for us. Do those black educators all echo the same song about liberating mindset, empowerment, freedom, or a simulation, consumerism, be quiet, make yourself small, and then get into the thing? Wherever you place your value, at least be able to make the differentiation between the two. And if you're a black educator listening, ask yourself, where on that spectrum, it's not an either or, where do you fall and why? I just asked black educators to take that opportunity to examine their own practice because we've rarely been given a chance to have an informed decision on the kinds of educators that we want to be. Because the definitions of success are often written by folks way outside of our community and our psyche and our heritage. So I just ask everyone to just take a moment to ask themselves those questions.
And I would say, just to quickly piggyback on that, if I go back into that time machine and think about the relationship that those teachers had with us as black boys, all of the impact, it was subtle. It was not overt because there were other teachers that were not black who were around. And sometimes a lot of those teachers those black male teachers were quite proficient. And I think the modern technical term is the side eye, because they knew how to give young Black boys the
Yeah.
side eye, the if you know look
There you
that
go.
we as young Black boys who had fathers in the household, we knew that look, which was not just to behave, but to absorb
There you go.
and to understand the information and the education that was being imparted to us. Dr. Orpheus Williams, I know we've got to let you go. Good luck with the upcoming conference. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
talking
much.
to us.
Appreciate you. And congratulations again, Brother Leon. All right.
Thank you so much. Thought I lost you for a minute
Thank you.
there.
Have a good
Yeah, so let me. I
afternoon.
wanted to continue during these last 10 minutes or so, because I think it is so important. First of all, we've got to talk about the black don't crack of it all. With you being a teacher for 25 years and looking like you're just starting out, but
No.
over these 25 years as a teacher, particularly when you were paying attention to, to Black boys, what is the thing that comes to mind?
I would say, especially in the setting that I'm in, is their experience is not the same as everyone else's. And I'm happy that I'm here, that I can really talk to them about having a similar experience where it's not always great. If we want to say that we want our students to come back and be teachers, and I think you kind of talked about this a little earlier, we want to make sure that the experience that they're having is one of elevation, one of empowerment. And we know that public schools have not always been spaces for historically marginalized groups in terms of elevating their stories. And so that is something that we really need to look at to make sure that there's space for these young men. Are we tapping them to be leaders? Are we broadening our interpretation of what success looks like and giving them opportunities to learn in ways that are not always the dominant pedagogical ways that we expect or that some expect learning to take place? And so when we think about this idea that we want more educators of color, one of the things that is important is that, well, what does that mean for us in terms of what we think a good teacher looks
Mm-hmm.
like? For me, I'm looking for individuals that are charismatic. I'm individuals that are, people are around them and they have energy. It's not always the person that's getting straight A's. And so I think that we need to begin to be more open to that. And I try to do that with especially the young Black boys that I encounter, and really just let them know their experience. And I want them to know that they can talk to me.
Mm-hmm. Education is one
Can you still
thing,
hear me?
but let me ask you this. Education is one thing, but when we're talking about the development of manhood, because I'm sure the home life of the boys that you are teaching, it kind of runs the entire spectrum. Solid households with two-parent families, solid households with one-parent families, uh, households with two-parent families that are not so solid, that are not so stable, one-parent families, and sometimes you just don't know what's going on with some of these people. And so the education piece we understand, but what does it look like when you know that you are reaching someone? What does that, what do you see? How do you know there's a return on your investment?
Hmm. So I think it's a powerful feeling, and it's something that I talk to when I speak to audiences and people about that trust that students that you have to earn. And it's something that is not easily given, but it's something that once you receive it, you hold it in such high regard. I think that as an educator, you have a tremendous amount of power to do both something positive, but also to do harm. I think that our previous guests discussed that. Are you an overseer or are you a liberator? And so, what are you going to do with this power? And so, for me, one of the things that really I see is that they come and visit you. You are a safe space in the school for them to come to when they have questions. Sometimes they just want to come and say hello, but
Mhm.
it's meaningful. They come by, just give you a fist bump. What's up, Mr. Smith? How you doing? And the fact that they took out time in their day just to check on you, how are you doing? Is really important. And so I noticed that you may see a young man in the beginning of the year, you're just getting to know him, and you might not see him too much. But as you start to build that trust and that relationship, you find that you see him more. He's coming to check you out. He's coming to say hello.
Mhm. I have another
Come and
question.
ask how you're doing.
I have
How was
another.
your day?
I have
So I
another.
think
Hold
that
on.
for me,
I'm sorry. Your signal
that's
was
extremely powerful
your signal
because
is
I
still
know that
jumping.
this is a young man.
We were having a little technical issue, and I apologize to our listeners. But one of the questions that I think is so important, because we've been talking about your relationship with uh, the Black boys that you've encountered, but what is your message to the parents of those Black boys?
I would say that, certainly, well, first of all, it depends on the context, I think, but I think all parents care about their children. And, I would just say continue to be vigilant, because we know our parents, our Black parents, they care about their children just like any other group of parents. And we have to make sure that the schools are being held accountable, just like we would expect. This is our children are our most precious investment. And we want to make sure that the schools are educating our children, are loving on our children, are treating them with dignity and respect, are teaching them in culturally responsive ways. So I just think it's important that we realize that the school is a welcome environment for all people. I think that when we think about some of the conversation we had earlier, it might not have been that way for us, right? We may not have been treated well within the school, but it is important for us to know that we belong there and that we should certainly continue to be advocates for our children with the teachers, with the principals, with the counselors, and know that our voices matter and that it is a partnership with the school for the education of our children.
How do you know that you are successful with your children?
Hmm. Well, sometimes you don't know right away. I think that's with teaching, it's not always going to be that they leave that particular day and say, oh my goodness, that's the most important, lesson that I've ever heard. But, you do have those moments where you'll get emails, you'll get cards, you'll get letters. And, students will, and it's a blessing. And students will say, Mr. Smith, I had you, I don't know if you remember me, but you really had an impact on my life. And those things often happen on the days you need them the most, and so it's not always every day, but it is those moments where you get those cards and you get, and then again, it's just those daily interactions where, you'll have students that you maybe had in previous years that will come back and visit you, ask how you're doing, check in on you. And so those relationships, so it always comes back to that, those relationships matter where the student realized that you really cared about them. It wasn't about you teaching them about whatever the content was, but you actually took an interest in them and they appreciated that.
Mhm. Finally, what do you think should be the message for administrators in reference to supporting teachers in this mission to make sure that Black male teachers are recruited, supported, and the like?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think that they definitely need to make sure they're checking on their Black educators, their Black male educators. It cannot be something where we're just checking a box and say, oh, we have a certain number of Black male educators, so we're okay now. We realize that in many instances, our Black male educators are in buildings where there's maybe not many of them. And so the type of checkup that we need to do is going to be different than it would be with others. But I think that that's what any leader does. You know, when you're a coach, you realize that the way you coach one player is not the same way that you can coach another player. And I think as a school leader, you have to realize that different teachers, different members of the staff are going to need different things. But the more you're aware of that, I think the better leader that you can be. I think that it's important that they allow our Black male educators to be wholly themselves, to make sure that they can be the Black male educator that they want to be, and to see them as leaders. You know, too often we see or Black male educators are seen as disciplinarians, and they're not
Mm,
disciplinarians. They're content experts. They are counselors. They are cheerleaders in terms of, you know, the support that they give our students. And so see them as that. If there's some opportunities for advancement, opportunities for mentoring or coaching, if there's some opportunities for district leadership or anything like that, think about your Black educators, your Black male educators, because they want those roles as well.
mm. Final question. Are you going to stay in the classroom?
For right now, for the foreseeable future, I love it. I love it. I love teaching. It's something, as I said earlier, where I really feel like I'm making a difference. Every day I walk in here, I know that the work I'm doing matters. And that is so important to me. I always wanted that. I didn't want a job where I felt like I was just punching a clock, or, you know, I was just kind of doing something that was not necessarily meaningful. And for me, this is something I thought I was called to do. So I feel actually more inspired now than I did maybe 10 years ago.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you spending some time to talk to us about this very, very critical issue in this very critical time. Uh, you you are teaching such an important topic, social studies, history, culture, because there are so many factors that are trying to eliminate Black culture from our public school system. So we certainly salute you, Leon Smith. Also, we want to thank Dr. Orpheus Williams, the Chief Program Officer for the Center for Black Educator Development, for spending some time with us earlier. Again, Mr. Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, October 28th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.